When Brenda torched my cornfield, she walked straight into the trap I'd been setting for 6 weeks. The smell of burning corn filled the night air, acrid and sweet at the same time. 3 acres of corn. My daughter's college tuition money turning to ash before my eyes. Brenda Hartwell stood by the fence line with that smug smile, still clutching the gas, like she'd just finished her masterpiece. Farming is so outdated. She giggled into her phone, live streaming to her Facebook friends. This neighborhood deserves something better than this rural eyesore. Then the sirens started wailing, getting closer, getting louder. Brenda's smile vanished when she realized those fire trucks weren't heading somewhere else. Because what this psycho didn't know? I'd been expecting her to pull exactly this stunt for weeks. What would you do if your HOA neighbor burned down your kid's future for Facebook likes? Tell me where you're watching from. Let me back up and tell you how this whole nightmare started. My name is Charlie Fieldstone, third-generation corn farmer on 8 acres in rural Ohio. My grandfather bought this land back in 1953 for $300 and a handshake. Back then, it was nothing but cornfields far as you could see. Fast forward 70 years, and I'm surrounded by McMansions with names like Whispering Oaks Estates. The irony, not a single oak tree left, and the only heritage around here is my family's farm that these people treat like dog crap on their designer shoes. My wife Denise teaches 3rd grade at the local elementary school. Twin daughters Sarah and Emma, both 18 and college-bound. Sarah wants to be a veterinarian. Emma's going for agricultural engineering. College costs $30,000 each per year. You know what pays for that massive expense? My corn harvest. Every damn kernel. The sweet smell of corn tassels in late summer used to be my favorite thing. Now it just reminds me of everything I almost lost to one psychotic real estate agent. Enter Brenda Hartwell, 48, HOA president and part-time house flipper with predatory instincts. She moved into the biggest McMansion 3 years ago, vinyl siding, fake shutters, garage bigger than my barn. Her backyard butts against my property line, separated by my grandfather's weathered oak fence. Last spring, she shows up at my door with a clipboard and that dead-eyed realtor smile that could freeze hell over. Hi, neighbor. We've had several complaints about your farm equipment being visible from the street. It's quite unsightly. I looked at my 1960 John Deere sitting exactly where it belonged, where it had sat for decades. Lady, that tractor's been there longer than your whole subdivision. The smile turned predatory, showing teeth like a shark sensing blood. Several residents say it's killing property values. My clients are very concerned about maintaining the suburban aesthetic we've worked so hard to create. Here's the kicker that made my blood boil. My farm predates their HOA by 40 years. I'm not even in their jurisdiction. But try explaining property law to someone whose biggest crisis is mismatched mailboxes. This is a working farm, I said, keeping my voice level. The equipment stays where it belongs. Mr. Fieldstone. Her voice went ice cold, like winter frost settling on my skin. Being a good neighbor means considering how your choices affect others. I'd hate for this situation to become unpleasant. That's when my rooster Hannibal decided to crow right on cue, as if announcing the start of a war. The real gut punch came 2 days later. I'm out checking irrigation lines when I hear voices by the fence. Brenda's there with some slick guy in a $1,000 suit, pointing at my cornfield like she's already planning the street names and calculating profit margins. 8 acres, perfect for luxury townhomes, she's saying, her voice carrying that excited edge of anticipated money. The farming situation is temporary. These old-timers never last long once you apply proper pressure. The suit nods, taking notes on an expensive tablet. Timeline for vacant possession? 6 months, max. These old farmers always cave when you know which buttons to push. I've seen it happen a dozen times before. My blood turned to ice water. This wasn't about property values or community standards. This was about commission checks and development deals worth millions. She was already selling my land that wasn't even for sale, treating my family's legacy like it was some obstacle to be removed. I ducked behind my grandfather's old tool shed, heart pounding like I was back in Afghanistan. The rough bark of that century-old oak tree felt solid under my palm, but everything else suddenly felt fragile and under attack. That night, I called Jake Thornfield, agricultural lawyer and old army buddy who'd served 2 tours in Iraq with me. Jake, hypothetically speaking, what happens if someone tries to harass a farmer off his land for development purposes? Nothing hypothetical about it, Marcus. Happens all the time across rural America. Document everything, every conversation, every incident, every threat. And Marcus, watch your six. These development schemes can get nasty real fast. As I hung up, Denise came out to the porch with 2 cold beers, sensing the tension in my voice. Everything okay out here? I looked across my land, corn stalks rustling in the evening breeze, the same sound my grandfather heard every summer for decades. Honey, I think we're about to find out just how far some people will go for money. The next morning, I found my irrigation hose had been slashed in 3 places. The water was pooling uselessly in the dirt, while my corn slowly started to wilt in the July heat. Game on, Brenda. The harassment campaign began immediately and systematically. Tuesday afternoon brought Fire Marshal Dave Peterson, looking apologetic as hell with his clipboard in hand. Marcus, sorry to bother you, but I got a formal complaint about illegal agricultural burning on your property during drought conditions. Illegal burning? I wiped sweat off my forehead. Dave, you know I haven't burned anything since spring cleanup, and that was with proper permits. He handed me a manila folder containing doctored photographs showing smoke rising from what looked like my back 40. Except that smoke was actually from Tom Henderson's controlled burn 3 miles away, shot from an angle that made it look like my property was on fire. This is complete bullshit, Dave. That's not even my land in the background. I know, Marcus, but rules are rules. I got to investigate every complaint, no matter how suspicious it looks. 20 minutes later, Dave confirmed what we both knew. My fire safety protocols were military-grade perfect. But someone was building a paper trail of false complaints against me. Wednesday brought County Water Inspector Carol Harris with fabricated usage reports claiming I was using enough water for a golf course and depleting neighborhood wells. My grandfather's old well couldn't pump that volume if it ran 24/7, but someone had created official-looking documents that would fool a rushed inspection. Who filed the complaint? I asked. Anonymous tip, but Marcus, Carol glanced around nervously. This feels orchestrated. Get your own usage test done fast. But my real breakthrough came from Harold Grayson, 75-year-old retired postal worker who'd lived here since before Brenda's McMansion invasion. Harold had watched this neighborhood transform from family farms to suburban sprawl, and his late wife Helen used to sit on their porch every evening watching my grandfather work the fields. Marcus, we need to talk, Harold whispered during our fence conversation, glancing around like he was about to confess to murder. That Hartwell woman came by yesterday asking questions about your schedule when you'd be away from the property. Wanted to know about any safety violations I might have noticed. His weathered hands gripped the fence rail so tight his knuckles went white. When I didn't bite, she offered me $500 cash for information. Then she suggested I might start noticing some violations if I knew what was good for me. Harold's voice shook with disgust. Marcus, she's not just targeting you. She's recruiting people throughout the neighborhood, offering cash for false testimony. Most folks told her to take a hike, but a couple seemed interested in easy money. That's when Harold became my inside man and revealed the scope of Brenda's conspiracy. By Friday, I had uncovered Brenda's real motivation. Harold's reconnaissance revealed she'd been promising buyers that agricultural zoning changes were anticipated, except no such changes were even being discussed. Harold recorded Brenda discussing her $2.8 million development deal with Midwest Corporation, 32 luxury townhomes starting at $400,000 each. She'd borrowed against that expected commission money, second mortgaging her house and buying a new Mercedes on credit. Farmers always cave under enough pressure. Brenda's voice was crystal clear on Harold's recording. I've orchestrated this before. The agricultural situation is temporary. I guarantee vacant possession by October 1st. If this timeline slips, we're talking $50,000 in penalty clauses, plus you forfeit the commission, a male voice responded. Trust me, I've got county officials building harassment cases, neighbors documenting fake violations, and if necessary. Her voice dropped to a whisper that made my skin crawl. Well, farm accidents happen all the time. But here's where 20 years of military strategy kicked in. When your enemy reveals their true objective, you don't just defend, you destroy their operational foundation. That weekend, I researched agricultural easements until my eyes burned from screen glare. I discovered that farmers can file conservation easements that legally protect land from development forever. The process takes 30 days, but once approved, the property becomes untouchable. Even better, the state pays substantial tax benefits to encourage agricultural preservation. Monday morning found me at the county courthouse with a stack of forms and a $500 filing fee. By noon, my 8 acres were officially protected under Ohio's Agricultural Land Preservation Program forever. The beauty of it. Even if Brenda somehow forced me to sell, no developer could touch the land. Her $2.8 million deal had just become worthless paper. But I kept this information locked down tight. Sometimes the best weapon is the one your enemy doesn't see coming. The sabotage escalated dramatically over the next few weeks. Someone dumped sugar in my combine harvester fuel tank, creating crystalline sludge that clogged fuel filters. My hydraulic lines were cut on the corn picker, not severed completely, just nicked enough to cause dangerous failures under pressure. A farmer working alone could get seriously injured if hydraulic equipment failed unexpectedly. Then came the wheel bolt sabotage. Someone had loosened the lug nuts on my farm trailer just enough to create dangerous wobbling at highway speeds. If I'd been hauling corn to market on Route 33 and those wheels came off, I could have killed someone. Each incident was documented in high-definition detail by my upgraded security cameras. Brenda's face, her license plate, even audio of her muttering complaints about stubborn farmers while committing felonies on my property. But the real escalation came when I caught Brenda attempting to steal my irrigation pump motor. The diesel engine that powered my water system was worth about $3,000, but more importantly, losing it during drought season would kill my entire crop within days. Thanks to Harold's intelligence network, I'd been expecting this move. He'd overheard Brenda telling her hired investigator that equipment theft would force the farmer to abandon the property for financial reasons. When my motion sensors detected movement near the pump house at 2 a.m., I was ready. I slipped out the back door and crept through my cornfield using techniques I'd learned during night patrols overseas. Brenda was there with a truck and trailer, attempting to disconnect my pump motor with the help of Rick Polson, her private investigator. "Just cut the mounting bolts," Brenda whispered. "Once his irrigation fails, he'll have to sell within a week." "What if he has insurance?" Polson asked. "Equipment theft isn't covered under basic agricultural policies unless it's specifically itemized. This pump wasn't valuable enough to list separately." "Wrong on both counts, lady." I let them work for another 10 minutes, documenting their criminal conspiracy in admissible detail, then called Deputy Rodriguez. The sound of approaching sirens sent them scrambling, but not before my cameras captured everything. With 18 days until her development contract deadline, Brenda Hartwell made the decision that would seal her fate forever. Harold's breathless report Tuesday evening confirmed my worst fears about how far desperate people will go. "She's lost it completely, Marcus." Harold gripped the fence rail, knuckles white with tension. "Overheard her talking to that Polson character about creating an accidental fire that would force immediate land sale. She's been researching volunteer fire department response times, wind patterns, everything." The blood in my veins turned to ice water. Fire during drought season could spread to neighboring properties, maybe even threaten lives. "Gets worse," Harold continued, his voice barely a whisper. "She mentioned something about making it look like faulty electrical equipment and having an alibi at Thursday's city council meeting. That gave me 48 hours to prepare for what could be the final battle of this war." Wednesday morning, I drove to hardware stores in 3 different counties, paying cash for fire suppression equipment. Portable pumps, emergency water tanks, flame-retardant chemicals, everything I'd need to fight a fire until professional help arrived. But my real preparation involved coordinating with Fire Chief Danny Morrison and Deputy Rodriguez. I installed military-grade thermal imaging cameras throughout my cornfield, linking directly to both fire dispatch and sheriff's department emergency systems. Thursday evening arrived with oppressive humidity and dead calm air. Perfect conditions for controlled burning, terrible conditions for stopping wildfires once they started. At 11:47 p.m., my thermal cameras detected 2 heat signatures moving along the eastern property line. Brenda and Polson, right on schedule, pouring accelerant along a 100-foot section of corn, creating a fire break designed to contain the blaze initially before letting it spread accidentally. "Remember, we were never here," Brenda whispered. her voice carrying clearly in the still night air. This needs to look like equipment malfunction. Maybe that old electrical panel finally sparked. What about insurance investigations? Poulson asked, unscrewing another fuel container. By the time investigators arrive, Charlie will be so desperate to sell that he'll accept any offer. Farmers always cave when they lose a crop. They were committing felony arson while discussing real estate fraud, documenting their own criminal conspiracy in admissible detail. At 11:52 p.m., Brenda flicked her lighter. The corn ignited instantly, accelerant-fueled flames racing along the pre-soaked line like liquid fire. Within seconds, the blaze was visible from space, orange light dancing against the night sky. My thermal cameras triggered automatic alerts to fire dispatch, sheriff's department, and my phone simultaneously. Fire trucks were rolling within 90 seconds, record response time that caught Brenda completely off guard. I watched her panic as sirens wailed in the distance. She and Poulson tried to flee, but their escape route led directly past responding emergency vehicles. "Ma'am, step away from the fire line. You're under arrest." The crackling flames provided a fitting soundtrack to the end of Brenda Hartwell's criminal career. The irony was perfect. Brenda's arson happened the same night as the monthly city council meeting, where she'd planned to use the meeting as her alibi. Instead, it became the venue for her very public downfall. I was sitting in the back row when Fire Chief Morrison's radio crackled. Code red, agricultural fire on Fieldstone property. Multiple units responding. Possible arson in progress. The room erupted. That's when Brenda made her fatal mistake. She turned around with this satisfied little smile, like she was enjoying a private joke. But her expression changed when Morrison got his second update. "Chief, we've got the arsonists in custody. 2 suspects arrested at scene with accelerant containers." The blood drained from Brenda's face like someone had pulled a plug. "Mrs. Hartwell," Morrison called out. "Mind staying put for a few minutes? Deputies have some questions." That's when I stood up and dropped the nuclear bomb. "Mr. Mayor, I have evidence relevant to tonight's arson that the community needs to hear." I played Harold's recordings, Brenda's voice discussing the development deal, her borrowed commission money, her timeline pressures. Gasps echoed through the chamber as people realized they were hearing evidence of organized real estate fraud. "But here's the beautiful part," I continued. 3 weeks ago, I filed an agricultural conservation easement on my property. That land is now legally protected from development forever." The silence stretched like a held breath. Then Harold stood up. "I've been Brenda's inside source for months," he announced. "Everything Charlie just said is true. She hired criminals to harass him, bribed neighbors for false testimony, and tonight she tried to burn down his crops to force a land sale." That's when Deputy Rodriguez walked through the chamber doors with, "Backup officers. Brenda Hartwell, you're under arrest for felony arson, conspiracy to commit fraud, criminal harassment, and about 6 other charges we're still sorting through." Jake Thornfield stepped forward with a folder thick as a phone book. "For the record, Mrs. Hartwell, you're also facing federal RICO charges, civil damages in excess of $500,000, and permanent disbarment from real estate practice in Ohio. Your development deal is void, your commission is forfeited, and your assets are frozen pending investigation." Brenda's legs gave out. She collapsed like a deflated balloon, the reality finally hitting home. No development deal, no commission, no future, just criminal charges and financial ruin. As Rodriguez led her out in handcuffs, she passed right by my seat. For a moment, our eyes met, and I saw genuine fear mixed with the dawning realization that she'd destroyed her own life for money she'd never see. "Should have stuck to selling houses, Brenda," I said quietly. 6 months later, I'm standing in my cornfield watching Sarah and Emma help with spring planting. The legal carnage was beautiful to watch. Brenda pleaded guilty to felony arson and conspiracy, 2 years in prison, $50,000 in restitution, and a criminal record that'll follow her forever. Her private investigator got 18 months. Midwest Development paid $75,000 to avoid federal prosecution. But the real victory wasn't money. It was watching my daughters' faces when I told them college was fully funded. Insurance payouts plus lawsuit settlements meant both could pursue their dreams without debt. The conservation easement sparked a county movement. 17 families have protected over 300 acres from development, reducing property taxes while preserving agricultural character permanently. Our case triggered the Fieldstone Agricultural Protection Act, state legislation making farmer harassment a felony that's already being copied nationwide. We established a Family Farm Defense Fund scholarship with settlement money, providing full college tuition for students studying agricultural law. Walking through corn rows now, listening to my daughters laughing as they work, I realized this story was never about Brenda Hartwell. It was about ordinary people refusing to let money-hungry bullies destroy something beautiful for profit. The rough bark of grandfather's oak tree feels eternal under my palm as evening light paints gold across fields that will never be subdivisions, never be strip malls, never be anything but what they've always been. Good land growing food for families who understand what really matters. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to let the bastards destroy what matters most. Family land, honest work, the right to live without fear of suburban parasites who mistake greed for progress. Share your own HOA nightmare story in the comments. Subscribe for more tales about ordinary people beating corrupt systems. Next week, how a retired teacher used a 200-year-old property deed to shut down a luxury resort stealing her lake access.